We're rolling into the Thanksgiving slate of games, and today we're going to go game by game, matchup by matchup, look for those must-start players, look for those sneaky start players, and then on top of that, look for those guys we don't really want to start, but we have to, even the guys we want to bench. We're looking at everybody. The Thursday games and that one Friday game will be mixed into this video, and the Sunday slate and Monday night slate will be done on Saturday. But before we dig in, you need to click that subscribe button right now because we're going deep on these matchups every week, helping you set your lineups. On top of that, you need to drop your start-sit questions down below. I'll answer them tonight and into the morning, off and on, as many as possible. I will answer before kickoff. I'll do a lot tonight, but I will be there for you. And then Saturday, we will do it again. Every Saturday, we do the must-start video, so you can ask your questions in the chat down there. Drop it down below. Click that subscribe button. Stop missing out. Ric Flair's watching. Do not disappoint Ric Flair. We're going into our first matchup here, and we're looking at the Bears and Lions. We got a 48.5 over-under, and I'm going to say the same thing I said last week. If Caleb Williams can play well, like he has the last 2 weeks, we're going to get fireworks. We're going to get a fun one to watch. If the Lions figure out how to shut him down, figure out to slow him down in any way, shape, or form, then this could be an ugly matchup. I look for the Detroit Lions to do Detroit Lions things because they've been nasty all year. I look for the Bears to try and ramp things up. And they've been hot in these last 2 games. Maybe we continue. And we're looking at these quarterbacks. Goff is a quarterback that's a fringe QB1 for the week that people are looking to starting. A lot of people are going to look at that 48.5 over under and they're going to roll with it. But honestly, if you're in a 1 QB league, I would not be rocking 2 quarterbacks. It's just not my style. I'd rather have that extra spot for a handcuff running back, an upside player, whatever. I want that lottery ticket. I think a lot of people will start Goff. I believe he's not going to be benched too much. I believe a lot of people are going to be looking at him. Caleb Williams is a trendy pick off the waiver wire. If you're hurting at quarterback, this might be the guy you're going with this week. He might be your streamer due to the matchup here, but we will look deeper at the wide receivers, and that will help you make your case here. We're looking at the running backs, though. DeAndre Swift against the Detroit Lions. Interesting matchup. Last 3 weeks, the Detroit Lions is averaging 9.4 PPR fantasy points. However, they shut down Jonathan Taylor, Travis Etienne. Joe Mixon, though, scored 17 on them. The rest of the season, though, they're bend, but they rarely break. So when you look at a starting running back going up against Detroit, you should expect the top guy in that backfield to get around 10 fantasy points. However, they will shut you down. They shut down Rachaad White and company, James Conner and company, Travis Etienne and company, Jonathan Taylor and company. Outside of those 4 performances, they're usually allowing around 10 to like 17 points. Expect Swift to sit around that area. I expect 10, 11, 12 from him. I don't expect him to go off. Kenneth Walker's the only running back to go off against them. That was a long time ago. They're pretty shut down against running backs. Aaron Jones scored a 20 spot. DeAndre Swift, expect him catching balls out of the backfield. Expect him to be okay in fantasy. I would not be super excited about this matchup, but the 48.5 over-under, if Caleb Williams pushes it, we might get a surprise. We might. So get out the rally cap. Hope for that. I think odds are if you simulate this game 100 times, odds are most time he'll land in that 10 to 12 threshold of PPR fantasy points. To get more, we got to cross the goal line. We got to get creative in the passing game. That could happen. That could be in the range of outcomes, but less likely. Busting for just 3 points, that's not likely either. I think somewhere in the middle is where we're at. Roschon Johnson, you're watching. He might cross the goal line. Only people who are starting him are those who are hurting at running back. We're looking at the 3 amigos here at wide receiver. Last week, Keenan Allen got a lot of targets. Odunze's been getting a lot of work as well, and DJ Moore. And you look at the target shares among these wide receivers, 23% for DJ Moore, 26% for Keenan Allen, and 20% for Odunze. So they're all sharing the work. I expect some of them to get it in this game and some of them to just be simmering a little bit. When I say simmering, just get you baseline production. But the Detroit Lions, They'll give up some to wide receivers, but they won't break. They've only broken plus 20 points a few times this season. Usually they're around the 15 to 20 range to that top wide receiver. Who do you think that top wide receiver out of this group will be? I want to know in the chat below, because your opinion is just as important as mine here. I see a carousel effect. Any wide receiver on this team can get it on any given time. The odds usually point to DJ Moore. Odunze's got upside here. Keenan Allen's starting to get more work. These wide receivers are something you might be kicking the can with this week. Just because we got a 48 over 100, we're a Thanksgiving Day game, you might want some action tomorrow anyway. So you just might want some action. So you might be looking at one of those wide receivers. Kmet is a tight end that you're probably not thinking about. And odds are you're not, but he was hot last week. And the week prior, his numbers are starting to go up a little bit. But there's other tight ends to look at. You probably already got another tight end. If you're looking at your lineup getting into the playoffs, you probably got a good tight end to roll with. You've been leaning on that tight end the whole time. This is a sneaky matchup. He can sneak one out in front of you. If the game breaks, if Caleb Williams can cook, he could not cook though. That's the chance. The Detroit Lions are good. This is a good team. There's a lot of gamble in this game. However, when you're looking at this, you're probably staying away. You're probably not picking him up, but he is a hot waiver wire tight end right now. A guy to look at, but that's only if you're hurting at tight end. Notice I'm not telling you to start or sit anybody. I'm just trying to give you the baseline analysis so you can just make your decision. With Kmet, odds are you probably got other options. Now we're looking at the running backs here for the Detroit Lions. David Montgomery limited in walkthroughs. Something to pay attention to as we get to this game. I'm not going to say whether he's going to be in or out because I don't know, and that would be lying. Jahmyr Gibbs getting the work. Jahmyr Gibbs has been hot. And honestly, I don't see anybody being able to bench him. Like, how are you going to have better? How blessed are you going to be? You're in a 5-team league, 4-team league? Seriously. I know the matchup here is all right against Chicago. They're about league average and everything when allowing fantasy points to running backs, so there's some upside here. I don't see anybody benching Jahmyr Gibbs. I look for him to have a good game. I look for him to be able to do well. I look for him to be able to perform, get work in the passing game. Odds of him busting are very small. The Bears can hold down running backs. They did that a few times this year, so it is in the cards. But they also break the running backs. They've also done that a few times this year. They either hold it down or they break, it looks like. There's a few times they bend a little bit, but they're either doing one or the other. Jahmyr Gibbs could explode or it could be quiet. So just pay attention to that, but I don't think anybody's going to. Now we're looking at the wide receivers here for the Detroit Lions. Amon-Ra St. Brown plans to play. He's been questionable all week. More likely he's going to be out there due to that. But we will see. We're looking at Amon-Ra going off, getting targets. No one's going to bench Amon-Ra St. Brown unless you're severely blessed at wide receiver. I do encounter people who are that blessed at wide receiver sometimes. Jameson Williams, upside gamble like he is every week. You can't trust him. You hate to start him, but you also hate to bench him. When you're looking at the Bears here, they will break the wide receivers. They'll break a 30 spot here and there. They'll break a 20 spot here and there. They'll break the top end wide receivers. And Jameson Williams can stretch it on any given play, get that opportunity on any given play. You got to watch out for him. We're looking at Sam Laporta. He's been up and down with a lot of downs this year. We're playing against Chicago, about league average when allowing fantasy points to tight ends. You also want to look at the tight ends who are scoring on them. Zach Ertz, Trey McBride, TJ Hawkinson, Evan Ingram. Tight ends who are getting a lot of volume and opportunity. That's what we're seeing here. He's getting volume and opportunity, but not to a large degree. His target share has dipped down to 14%. Last year it was around 20% or a little bit more, so it's dipped down. So we can earn more targets in this matchup. We could be good to go, but if we're sitting at our usual, our average, then the odds will be reduced. It's really depending on if he can score or not, because the average depth of target of 6.4 yards is rather go test, and you need to be able to rack up the targets or cross the goal line. But that's the story with most of the tight ends. Volume and touchdowns is what you need, and those are hard to predict for any player in the National Football League. Giants, Cowboys, 37 over under. This one could be ugly. This is the backup quarterback bowl. You look at all the stats from previous years, you got to throw it out because now we're dealing with a lot of injuries here. Cooper Rush coming in questionable. Looks like Drew Lock's getting the start, so this offense is going to look completely different. You do not know where the ball is going to go. We do not have a sample of Drew Lock in this offense, not a large one, so we got to watch this game, especially for the next few weeks to see what happens here. But when we look at the running backs, Rico Dowdle's the guy getting the touches for Dallas. And the thing about this, we got Drew Lock in, and if he falls on his face, the Dallas Cowboys could be up in this matchup, and they could be running the football. Rico Dowdle has been looking explosive, averaging 4.4 yards per carry on 122 rushing attempts. Rather solid, and the Giants give up something to running backs every single week. They have not held down a starting running back to double-digit PPR fantasy points. There's at least one running back on each depth chart to score 10-plus PPR fantasy points on them every single week this season. Jerome Ford, the lowest at 10 PPR fantasy points for the Browns with Deshaun Watson at quarterback. That's letting you know there's opportunity here. They're averaging 77.2% more than league average in the last 3 weeks, the running backs right now. That being said, there's opportunity here for Rico Dowdle to do something. Not a must start, but a guy you're paying attention to. And the reason why is because the quarterback situation, offense situation, a lot of variables here. But everything's looking advantageous right now. CeeDee Lamb's questionable. Yeah, he's probably going to be in the game. He played through this stuff before. But again, it's always going to be weird with Cooper Rush right out there. You're never going to trust it, but he's also getting the volume, the opportunity, and the targets every game with them. And if I was Cooper Rush, I'd be just throwing it to Lamb as well. Look for him to get volume. And then you're looking at the other wide receivers in the offense. Most of you are not starting them. You're not that poor at wide receiver to where you have to. But you're looking at Tolbert, Turpin, and the rest of the company there, and you're seeing what's up with that. But it's not really a matchup here where you think you can fuel multiple wide receivers unless something breaks. That's what you're paying attention to. On top of that, you're looking at what the Giants do to wide receivers here. They're about league average when it comes to allowing fantasy points to wide receivers. They rarely shut them down. Jalen Coker, Noah Brown were the only wide receivers here that got shut down. Or you're talking about teams here, Carolina and Washington. That being said, the rest of the teams in the league has been able to at least dish out something on them. And it's also game script dependent because the other team can get up on the Giants rather quickly. You're looking at the tight end spot here. Jake Ferguson might be out, but he might suit up. So we're watching the injury reports. If he's out there, then you're kind of just rolling with it unless you have another option. Luke Schoonmaker's also getting some good looks when he's getting the opportunity to play. And when I look at the tight end position for the Dallas Cowboys, I expect them to get volume, but the fantasy production could be up and down nonetheless because of the quarterback play and the average depth of target. The Giants are pretty decent when it comes to allowing fantasy points to tight ends. However, they get in weird game scripts to where teams don't have to push the pace in a lot of these games against them because they've been flatlining in a lot of these contests. But still, you're watching these tight ends from afar, and they're also good money ball plays in daily fantasy football. You're looking at the Giants running backs here, and you're looking at Tyrone, Tracy. He's got the gusto. We're averaging 5.1 yards per carry. The Cowboys are allowing fantasy points to running backs at a decent clip. On average, their league average. However, they will break. They broke the Joe Mixon. They broke the Bijan Robinson. They broke the David Montgomery and Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara. So there's potential here that Tyrone Tracy could bust out a few runs. I expect the boxes to be loaded. I expect Drew Lock to have to push it downfield to get things stretched out. If he can push some plays here, Tyrone Tracy could find some gaps here. But more than likely, with how the running back position is, you're probably looking at starting him nonetheless because he's a running back that's getting you 5.1 yards a clip, and he's getting a lot of touches. You're looking at the wide receivers here. Malik Nabers, even though it's questionable quarterback play right now, it's very hard to sit him. I'm not going to confidently predict that he's going to go off, but I will confidently predict that he's going to get a lot of workload. He's going to run a lot of routes. Wan'Dale Robinson, very eerie here with Drew Lock. Don't know if he's going to get a lot of targets or if things are going to be very gross. That's what you're thinking about this game plan, this offense when you're looking at this. The Cowboys will bend and break two wide receivers. Malik Nabers scored 23.1 PPR fantasy points in week 4 against them, so there is upside in this offense. However, the quarterback play is drastically different, but it will be aggressive quarterback play downfield which lends to Malik Nabers' style of play, which is something you want to see from this. Also could lend to Darius Slayton if he's running enough routes to get that opportunity. Now we're looking at Theo Johnson. I've never received a start-sit question with Theo Johnson before this year. Just haven't had it. It hasn't happened yet. I don't believe a lot of people are looking to start him. The Cowboys are about league average when it comes to allowing fantasy points to tight ends. I believe you're going to have to be pretty hurting to start Theo Johnson. You are not well off at the tight end spot because he's not getting enough targets per game to really make you feel comfortable starting him, because Malik Nabers is rocking a lot of targets and the passing offense is in jeopardy with the quarterback play. Now we're looking at Dolphins and Packers. We got a 48 over-under in the nightcap game on Thursday. This looks like it's going to be fireworks. This is going to be a fun one to watch. We're going to see fantasy points scored in all different directions, or it's going to be concentrated heavily in one direction, but a lot of points will be scored. That's what Vegas is saying with the 48 over-under. I'm not going to say that they're going to hit the over or under, but I'm going to say that, hey, this is going to be fun to watch. There's going to be a good amount of scoring, at least on the fantasy side. There's going to be a lot of activity here. You're looking at both these quarterbacks. I imagine a lot of people are starting them this week. I imagine they're going to be in a lot of lineups. They're seeing that 48 over-under. They're seeing the fireworks. They're wanting action on Thanksgiving night, and I can't blame them. You're looking at Josh Jacobs. He's getting a lot of work. He's getting a lot of carries. He's been pretty efficient this year when it comes to fantasy production per game. You're looking at the Miami Dolphins. They are allowing fantasy points to running backs. Pretty much a little bit less than league average over the last 3 games on the season. They're a little bit more than league average. They don't break too often. They broke once to Zach Charbonnet earlier in the season and James Cook. However, they allow around 10 to 15 to 16 points per game to running backs. Expect a good 10 spot at minimum out of him, and then around the 15-point range for Josh Jacobs. On the low, how that would look like if we did not hit that threshold of 10, probably an ugly matchup. Things not going our way with turnovers. The defense just finds a way to get it done. That's something that could happen. We see that in some of these matchups where the number's saying, hey, this could happen, but this actually happens. That could potentially happen. But we're looking at Josh Jacobs with what he's done this season. Expect him to get a lot of workload, some opportunities. And this is a decent, it's an okay mid-range matchup for him. And we're looking at the wide receivers here. Romeo Doubs is out. Do not expect him to play. Expect Jayden Reed to soak up targets. He's getting a 17% target share. That target share should bump up to him because he's the talented wide receiver in the offense. Dontayvion Wicks could be a sneaky guy in this offense. So if you want to gamble, go ahead on that one. I'm not advocating. I'm just throwing that out there as a name for daily fantasy football to get a player on the cheap. Christian Watson, I imagine he'll get a couple extra deep shots or opportunities in this matchup. You're looking at that. Bo Melton is another wide receiver to pay attention to. We got the carousel effect here with Green Bay. So any wide receiver in this game could blow up. However, you look at this matchup with Miami, they're not exactly locked down the wide receivers. They bend some, they shut down some. They've only broken a couple times when it comes to allowing wide receiver production and fantasy. They're typically bending just a little bit, 10 to 14 fantasy points. Jayden Reed might soak up more targets than expected. We got a higher over-under. I don't expect clock to leak in this game. How this could break is the defense doing well, Love not doing so well. That could potentially happen. And the run game start cooking some of the clock. One team's getting ahead and all that as well. That being said, Jayden Reed, a lot of people are going to look to start him nonetheless. They see that Romeo Doubs is out. They're going to see opportunities going his way. I cannot argue against you guys doing that. Tucker Kraft, a crafty tight end. He's getting targets. He's getting opportunity. ADOT's kind of low, but a 14% target share. Romeo Doubs is out, so we might get some extra targets in this matchup. And the Dolphins allow fantasy points to tight ends, which makes sense because they shut down the wide receivers a little bit, as you saw from the numbers. And in those games, you can just go to the tight end. The last 2 weeks, the tight ends have been doing well against them. The Packers know this. These are basic numbers, so they're going to look to go to Tucker Kraft, try to get him open. Trey McBride went off against him. Noah Fant did a little something against him. Tucker Kraft, usually if you have him on your roster, 9 times out of 10 you're starting him unless you're blessed with another good tight end. Now we're looking at the Dolphins running backs here. Achane is a guy that you're just plugging away with. That you're just doing it. You drafted him high. He's scoring fantasy points. We got an okay matchup here. This defense for the Packers, they'll allow fantasy points to running backs in damn near every game. And on the low is 9.8 to Christian McCaffrey. And that was a blowout game with them with a backup quarterback in. When you look at this, you got to look at the substance of the matchups here. They bend but don't break, but they will break a couple times. Saquon, they broke to Joe Mixon. They will probably bend a little bit here to Devin Achane. Watch Jalen Wright. We're just watching his touches. If you're playing daily fantasy football and you want a cheap running back to gamble on, this could be a fun matchup to do this with Jalen Wright because he's got the speed to go boom. He's eating that chicken bake from Costco, and it could be his boom time, but it could not be. That's not a call. That is strategy for daily fantasy football, something to pay attention to. You're looking at the wide receivers for the Dolphins. Now, Jalen Waddle's back for you. Are you going to start him or are you not? Can you trust it? It looks like this team's starting to hum the ball out there. Tyreek Hill's starting to do a little bit more. We're starting to get back to our old ways, and we're against a passing defense that's a little less than league average when it comes to allowing fantasy points to wide receivers. They slow that down. You see that right there, but they will bend a little bit. So the way this could break is Tyreek Hill or Waddle, both of them are extremely fast, breaking open, getting yards after the catch for a big gain. That could potentially happen. We could definitely see that in this matchup. Outside of that, peppered with targets, escaping here and there for some gains here, maybe bending a little bit. And when I'm saying bending, probably around that 15-point range for one of them, and probably around that 8 to 12-point range for another one. Now we're looking at Jonnu Smith. He's been racking up targets, and the Packers are about league average when it comes to allowing fantasy production to tight ends. That could be rolling his way. It is getting workload. And when it comes to tight ends, you just bet on the workload and just pray that it keeps going. He's got to score a touchdown for him to be viable for fantasy or break loose. He does have the size and just athleticism to get you some yards after the catch. That could potentially happen. They have allowed some tight ends to do something against him. George Kittle last week, Evan Ingram did a little bit, Trey McBride did a little bit, and Colby Parkinson did a little bit as well. That being said, he's always going to be good. He's always going to be there for the targets. Are you willing to put him in this matchup? Now we're looking at Raiders and Chiefs, the Friday game, and this one's at like 3:30 or something like this. Is a midday game. We got 42.5 over under. We got some weirdness with the Raiders coming on with the injuries, and the Chiefs are cooking. They're starting to get their power back. And what we're going to say about that is Isiah Pacheco, Marquise Hollywood-Brown here in the next few weeks. Aiden O'Connell will be the starter for the Raiders. That's going to be interesting because this is a nasty defense where you got to get creative with. It's going to be hard to get creative with a quarterback that's been sitting. Patrick Mahomes is going to do Patrick Mahomes shit. A lot of people are down on Patrick Mahomes for fantasy football due to the lack of volume, due to the lack of fantasy production. We might see that in this matchup for both sides. The game script has to break but one way or another for either quarterback to hit. The Chiefs have to get a huge lead for Aiden O'Connell to be able to get those garbage time opportunities. Patrick Mahomes has to be cooking. The offense has to be cooking. And I'm not just talking with the run game. I'm talking about through the air, around the red zone. Now we're looking at these running backs here. Isiah Pacheco is back. Will there be a pitch count? Kareem Hunt has been good. I imagine both these guys are going to get work. However, you can score fantasy points at a good clip against the Raiders. The top running back will get a good amount of fantasy points. That is for sure. This is a good matchup for both running backs. For both running backs to go off in this matchup. Kareem Hunt, 13.3 PPR fantasy points against them last time they played. Expect somewhere around that range for the top running back to score fantasy points, which is probably going to be Isiah Pacheco. I imagine you've been waiting for him to come back. You're kind of leery about that. You'll get more news as we get up to Friday. And this time last week, it looked like he was going to play. He was expected to play. But the news came out like the day before, that Friday actually, that he wasn't. Now we're getting this news. I feel like it's a better shot this week, but still watch the news, see what happens. I look for good fantasy production out of this backfield. It might be split up a little bit due to ramping up Isiah Pacheco. We're looking at these wide receivers, and honestly, we're going to get fantasy points from the Chiefs. How far can they get up on the Raiders? Will they need to throw it a lot? Or can they just sit on the clock most of the game? That is going to be the question here. Xavier Worthy scored 13.7 PPR fantasy points against him. That's on the high end for this team on the depth chart too during that time in week 8. Probably like that for the highest scoring wide receiver on this team. Probably DeAndre Hopkins, probably Xavier Worthy. The thing about Xavier Worthy, you're scared to start him and you're scared to bench him because he sucks a lot of the time. And then when he goes off big enough where you're just kicking yourself for the rest of the week. DeAndre Hopkins should be soaking in some targets. Last 3 weeks, the Raiders have averaged 45.7 PPR fantasy points to wide receivers, 36.8% more than league average. They have been leaking fantasy points to wide receivers. Courtland Sutton went off last week, so that could happen unless the Chiefs get up big. They have the potential to do that, especially if Aiden O'Connell does not play well. We're looking at Travis Kelce. When are you benching Travis Kelce? When's that happening? You have to be severely blessed at tight end to do so. That being said, you're rolling with him more than likely. It's a decent matchup. He's got to cross the goal line. He's going to get a good volume of targets at least going his way. His ADOT's higher than a lot of tight ends, but it's still very low at 6.6. So again, we need volume. We need a touchdown. We're going to be able to do that. We scored 25 points against the Raiders last time. Look for him to get some good looks. I don't see many people wanting to bench them. We're looking at the Raiders. This is where we got the question marks at the running back position. Alexander Mattison, questionable. Zamir White, questionable. We're watching those guys. And then we got to see the pitch count. This is Wednesday going into Thursday. A lot's going to happen in that time. So we're talking about a game farther out than usual. Watch the injury reports. Watch the injury reports. Watch Ameer Abdullah. This is a nasty defense that shuts down running backs. Chuba Hubbard had a good game against him, and he only scored 13 PPR fantasy points. James Cook had a good game, 19.7. The running backs who catches balls out of the backfield tend to do much better against the Chiefs. Ameer Abdullah, maybe Alexander Mattison if given enough opportunity, but he scored 9.4 last time they played against him. But he's also got to be in the game. Tough matchup. If you're better at running back, you got something safer at running back, you may want to roll with that instead. Maybe the game script breaks one way or another that could allow one of these running backs to roll, but it's not an advantageous situation. Trey Tucker's dealing with a hip injury. He's questionable, maybe in, maybe out. However, he racks up targets, about 5 targets a game, and this team has to be creative. However, you got Aiden O'Connell back there. Can you trust Jakobi Meyers? I bet you the targets go his way. I bet you they try to spit those targets at him. Can we convert? Because this team can be nasty against wide receivers. Recently, these last 3 weeks, Courtland Sutton did well. Curtis Samuel, creative targets. David Moore with Carolina, creative targets. Jacob Cowing. Teams have to go to ancillary wide receivers against them. DJ Turner might show up. Maybe another pass catcher. Maybe they go to Brock Bowers a little bit more. Expect the passing game to be weird from the Raiders. It could be awesome. The Chiefs could get so far up, they just let it roll. That's something you're going to want if you have any of these Raiders pass catchers. Brock Bowers, 10.8 PPR fantasy points last time he played against them. Expect somewhere around that line again. Expect that. How he could bust is they shut him down because they shut down a lot of tight ends and wide receivers, and Brock Bowers is a guy they're going to key on. I would not be surprised to get you 6, 7, 8. Also would not be surprised if he scores 15 or more. But 10.8, 11, 12, I see him living in that range here in Week 13. And if we simulate this game 100 times, that's probably where he's going to average out. Those are the matchups from Thursday and Friday night. Let me know what you think in comments below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on the way out. Thank you for watching. Catch you on the next video.